I'm Vonda Wetzel, and this is my husband Ben, and we want to welcome you to our log cabin. I guess it's a little mountain retreat here in the hills of West Virginia. We call it Bittersweet, and I'm going to let my husband tell you about the outside of our home and what we've tried to do here, and maybe he'll even tell you why we chose Bittersweet for a name.
Well, yes, the reason we named the place Bittersweet is because it has been a very bittersweet experience. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's really been very rewarding too. We bought the place in '74, just land, nothing here but trees, and we intended to use it just as a campsite because we had a camper and we were living in D.C., in the D.C. area rather, and we come back here on weekends and camp, and that's why we bought the place. We had no intention of building here at the time. Eventually, we decided we needed a tool shed up here, so we built the little shed out here. Just to keep some tools in when we came back here on weekends. I'd never built anything before in my life, so I made the floor joists out of plain old 2x4s, clear across the 8-foot length. The floor fell in before I got the roof on it, so I had to fix that. I learned on the way. So about 80, we had come back here to live. We weren't sure we were going to stay here, but we decided to build on the place here because we couldn't find anything else that suited us. So we started looking for materials to build with, and we put an ad in the prospector. It's a catch-all sheet that everybody advertises in, and we asked if anyone had a log cabin they'd like to sell. Well, we got a response from a man named Schaefer, had one down at Sutton, and it started out as an old schoolhouse down on Buffalo Creek. That's near Sutton, and it was later moved to another area there and made into a barn. And when we found it, it had been partially knocked down by rocks from the blasting when they built I-79 down through there. Mr. Schaefer gave us the place for taking it down and cleaning up his land. Well, it didn't look like much at the time, but we hauled it up here anyway, started putting it back together, and came up a little short. So Pete Phillips gave us an old granary that he had up on top of the hill here to supplement our building materials. We had to splice some logs, but we finally got up a story and a half and got it under roof, and it stood here for one winter kind of in limbo until the next spring we got started on it again. We were lucky enough to get some windows from the old Edmiston mansion where Union Drilling was remodeling for offices, and they had to be revamped a little, but we got them in there. Got the chinking done and got it under roof, and it turned out pretty well. That was about as far as we went with the outside at that time, and later on we built a lean-to bathroom back here on the back in 82 and 83, and then a little later we built the cellar here, which was quite a job getting a hole in the ground because the whole place is rock. We started that project in 84. Then just this spring we put a porch on the front, which you'll probably see a little later. And that's about where we are right now, as far as the outside's concerned. So I think I'll let them go ahead and film the outside, and then I'll turn it over to Vonda, and she can explain what's going on the inside.
Well, honey, I think, baby, you better tell them. It sounds pretty easy the way you explain it here. Maybe you better tell them some of your difficulties, like after you got the foundation built, maybe?
Well, I wasn't going to tell anybody about that, but I can blame it on my engineers. I had a friend and a brother
Oh, my God, there's a toad.
helping me with the foundation, and when we laid the first logs on, the front one, or rather the back one, fit perfect. The one across our foundation was a foot out of square. So we had to tear one wall completely down and reconstruct it. And there has been several little obstacles of the sort along the way, but we've managed to overcome them. I've had considerable help from friends and relatives, but a large amount of it I have done myself.
We have been very fortunate, like I say, in some of the family and friends to help us. But with him holding a full-time job, he has worked his head off, I shall say, since we're on video. But I'm sometimes very much amazed at the beautiful work he has done, not knowing that much about building, and what we have accomplished here with him working full-time. And it has been a struggle. And we have kept it paid for, which is so nice to be able to say. And it's only because of the donations of the stone from people and the logs and things like that. We hope to make our cellar house into our second bedroom. And it is now full of lumber. There will be a window here in the front, and maybe someday we can video again when it's finished. But we hope to have that into our guest bedroom. And right now, guests are more than welcome, but they have to stay in our camper. So I'd like for you, if you want to walk around to the front of the place. I always call this the back. We always have arguments every time somebody comes. But we'd like for you to walk around, maybe see the front porch that we're in the process of building. And he can tell you a little bit more about what our plans are for it. It's incomplete at this time.
All right, this is the frontal view of our cabin. People tend to call it the back because it faces away from the approach to the house. However, it is the front. This is our new front porch that is presently under construction. When it's finished, there will be 5 big windows across the front where you see the studdings, and there will be a large window in the north end, which is next to the bathroom, and a sliding glass door in the south end. We originally intended to screen it, and then we got to thinking, well, we might as well go with glass so we can use it year-round. You can now see our lean-to bathroom, which I mentioned before. That's a board and batten addition to the house. You can see, possibly, I don't know if the light's good enough, you can see my chimney back under the porch. That was originally out in the open. That chimney was constructed under duress. The snow was flying when I was finishing it, and that's the only heat for the house, or was at the time. There's a small chimney on the bathroom and a small stove in there that's similar to the large one. We have a Yodel wood stove that heats the entire house except for the bathroom, and we have a small one in there that's, I forget the name of it right offhand, but it's very similar to the Yodel. They do a fine job. If I could just figure out some way to get the wood cut without having to do it myself. But I guess I'll never figure that out. The flashing you may have noticed that I have around the chimney up there, I thought I was doing a wonderful job on it, but I don't know if you can tell in the picture, but it looks pretty crinkly. It doesn't leak though. Well, that's about it for the outside, I think. We'll go and turn this over to Vonda, and she can tell you about the inside. Oh, well, folks, we told you we were going to go inside, but we decided we hadn't gotten a shot of the south end of the house. And it's a pretty nice view of the house, so we thought we'd better get it before we go on inside. The logs, as you can see, some are hand-hewn, some are sawn. I don't know what period they're from, but I'd venture to say they're 100 years old or maybe more. The barn wood that you see up in the comb of the house, the eave or whatever you call it up there, gable, there you go. I built the thing, but I don't know what to call the parts, is a lean-to shed that was on the old barn. We salvaged that. We have it on the outside and the inside in that portion of the house. The little bird feeder there you can see, just a little old thing I threw together, but it's holding up pretty good. It's about 4 years old. The foundation under this portion of the house is the one I had to tear down and reconstruct. I told you about earlier that it was a foot off square. So that complete wall of the foundation had to be reconstructed. And as I said before, I blame that on my engineers.
I'd like to call your attention to the wooden hinges that he's made on our doors here in this house. And they are very unique, and as we get to the other door, I might open it and show you exactly how they have their own built-in burglar alarm as you open them. Our house is furnished by a lot of hodgepodge items. Some of them are family heirlooms. Some of them are yard sale items that I found great bargains, and some of them are auction sale type of things. But I've had lots of fun collecting them and bringing them home, and my husband groaning when he looks at them in their raw state. But as they're fixed up and refinished, he has been pleased with the results, I think. As we pan through the house, there's several items that are very dear and very special to me, and I want to call your attention to them a little later. That, as you're looking right now at the stove in this house, was our only heat for a couple of years here, and we have added another stove, but that does a wonderful job. And I highly recommend the wood heat if you can find somebody that'll give you the wood each winter. Getting the wood's a little hard. Now you're going into the dining room area, and there's many family mementos in that we'll get to a little later. We've found this house, the dimensions of this house is 22 by 26 on the main part. And we have broken it up into 3 sections in this part of the house, and of course one large bedroom in the upper part. antiques that we have here have been given to us by friends, and this particular Aladdin lamp that you see is an old original, and it was given to us by very dear friends in Maryland, Mr. and Mrs. Julian Delosier, and they became our second grandma and grandpa as we lived in Maryland, and we really treasure that from them. And another item in the bookcase over here, I'd like to get it out and kind of show you a little more in detail, is the jug that Elsie Bunton, Page Lake, took water into the fields to Watson Morgan Bunton when she was a little girl. And Grandma gave me this jug many years ago, and I highly treasure it. And she told me at that time how she used to carry water to Grandpa Bunton in the fields, of course. We have several items in the bookcase that I think are unusual, some of them. The baskets on top I made myself in basket class. I like to do a lot of arts and craft type of things. The churn in the bottom of the cupboard, it was from my grandmother and grandfather Rice, and they used to make vanilla, or not vanilla, they made all kinds of flavoring, but they used to make lemon flavoring in that churn, and the dasher in it, or paddles in it, still smells like lemon. And so that's also a piece that I cherish very much. The little wagon you see that I use for magazines was a nail box, and it says right on it, I believe, Buchanan, West Virginia, and I have used that wagon in a painting that I have done. And my mother and probably Aunt Martha and Uncle French used to put their blocks in and pull it by an old jar ring. And I've had an awful lot of comments on it, and really like the look of that old nail box made into a wagon. The two irons you see in my window up there are, one is from the Rice side of the family, and one is from the Page side, and given to me by both grandmothers, and it's also pieces that I cherish very much. The old bench, I don't know really where it came from. I was lucky enough to find it at an auction, and paid $11 for it, and I think I got a steal. The chest that I use for a coffee table, at this chest used to set at the top of the stairs. The pincushion that you see hanging on the wall used to hang in Grandma Elsie's bathroom, which used to be Uncle French's old bedroom in the house. And it was made by Aunt May, her sister, when I think she was about 12 years old. So it's a very, very old pincushion, and it's pretty torn and battered, but it's whole special memories for me because Grandma sat and told me all about it, and after her death I brought it here to have a place in my home. So I have a lot of little trinkets up there in the Coke carton too that came from out of her house and so forth. As we pan around and you see the grandfather clock there, that came from the Rice side of the family. That used to be in the hallway in my grandmother and grandfather Rice's home, and it strikes on the half hour and the hour, and it's has a lot of special memories. As a child, I used to stay all night with Grandma, and the clock would wake me up every hour striking until you got used to it. We never hear it because we're so used to it, but at that time, as a child, that's one of the sounds of Grandma and Grandpa's. So, the chest that you see that I have here for a coffee table was something that Grandma Elsie used in her upstairs to store old feed sacks and things like that in. And we oiled it and put some leather hinges on it because the hinges were pretty bad, but it serves us very well for a coffee table, and I have stored in it some of my quilt pieces and my rug braiding materials. And this house, as you go around, you will notice there's no closets and there's no cabinets. So any little nook and cranny I can find that is a box of some sort to store things, I really do need the space. Right above our stove here, we have an apple peeler, and above the door a little ways there is the cherry pitter. And there at the door, again, you will see the wooden hinges, and I'd like for my husband to... As he has the door open, you can see part of the porch, which we have just begun to build this summer. Inner sanctum for sure, right? Yes, bar the door for us. This is one way we have chosen to lock.
My name is not Katie.
Will that keep Indians out?
Of course, guaranteed to keep Indians out. One of my favorite pieces is not an antique, but it does look an antique, and this is the phone you see on the wall. My son Mike, I should say our son Mike, built it one year for me for Christmas, and the parts on it are antique, and it does work. And if my husband again will open it so we can see, we cheat a little bit. The modern phone is inside, but I do cherish that because he did build it for me, and I think he did a beautiful job, and it fits very well into our home. The round oak table in the dining area belonged to my grandmother and grandfather Rice, and it was given to us by them when we were first married. And we have cherished it and played many a cards and ate many a meal at that table. And it has 3 leaves to it, and makes a large oval table. And one of the nice memories that we have, well, at least I have as a child, is Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners eaten around on that table. For many years, Grandma used to fix big meals for us, and we all 5 of us girls and Mom and Dad used to enjoy the meal there. The lanterns that you see hanging on the post, I'll have to tell you a little story about. This particular one is a carbide lantern, and it was responsible for my grandmother and grandfather Rice meeting each other. My grandmother Rice was a school teacher, and they were having a box social one night, and in the old schoolhouse when she taught, and I don't know where the school was, but it was somewhere, I think, around the Clarksburg area. And the schoolhouse was not lit enough for the people who were coming to see. So my grandfather had come to the box social with his lantern to light his way, and my grandmother asked him if she could borrow his lantern to light the schoolhouse. So that's how they met, and subsequently they married, and so I like the story that goes with that, and it was almost like new when I got it because it was always kept in the lantern case. But I chose to take it out and to hang it and to enjoy it that way. The old railroad lantern we picked up at an auction, or I guess it's really a flea market junk shop one time several years ago. And the little lantern on this side of the post is a lantern that I was told at some time was a lantern that used to keep the boogeyman away when Mom and Aunt Martha were small. and it was lit sometimes at night. And Grandma Elsie gave me that one many years ago. I'd like to call your attention to the barrel here with the sacks of Morton salt and the Arbuckle's cane sugar. The two little bags there came from Grandma Elsie's place, and I've stuffed them with cotton and made little pillows out of them. One of my nice modern treasures, I guess, is a basket that you see that has the eggs in it that my mother made and gave me. And I think she does a real good job as a basket maker. The pie safe is one that I drug in, and my husband took one look and held his head and carried on when I brought it in. It was all painted white, and it really was a mess. But I got a steal on it. I couldn't pass it up. One of those great buys, $25, and I did get a good buy on that. And I use it as my dish cupboard. The waffle iron that you see on top is one that we make waffles in occasionally and enjoy it, and I use it.
Okay, that's good. Now, what's the next thing you want to get?
Well, my stove is one of my favorite. This and the stove, I think. The shelf above our sink, or the window there over the sink, contains a few of our heirlooms. The short coffee grinder belonged to my grandmother and grandfather Rice, and the taller one belonged to Grandma Elsie. And one of my childhood memories of Grandma Elsie also was her sitting and cleaning the eggs to get them ready for market and putting them into the big egg crates. And she used to try to get us kids when we'd visit her to help her do this. And of course I never wanted to because they were always dirty from the nest. But as you see, there is an egg grater up there that did also belong to her. As we move down to the sink, for 2 years in this house, we only lived in this part of the house, and we felt that a bathtub was more use to us than a sink was. So there where you see the sink, we had the bathtub on legs with cold water only for 2 years. And so when most people had a sink full of dirty dishes, I always had a bathtub full of dirty dishes. And I think that's the thing. When we first moved here, we had an ice box and we had the sink, and we were really, or the bathtub, and we really were roughing it. And I think that's what I missed the most, was getting more hot water out of the bathtub. Of course, we didn't have hot water. It had to come from the stove, and I never had enough hot water. So I was thrilled to death when we finally put the sink in and did get our hot water heater. The cupboard and the spice racks that you see up there, they're just little boxes that I've picked up at flea markets and made spice racks out of. But the cupboard I'm very proud of. I think that's one of the best buys I've ever made. We paid $9 in an old auction for that, and it came in pieces, and it was all painted white, and there's still some repair to do on it. There's a couple pieces missing on it, and the drawers, the two drawers that are still missing, need repair. But I use it, and one of these days when we have the time, I hope to have the drawers fixed and it in tip-top shape. But I'm very proud of that $9 buy. The stove that you see was purchased here in Buchanan. I happened to be looking at a house one day, and in the basement was this stove. And I asked the lady if she would sell it, and of course she wouldn't, because that was her canning stove, even though she was an elderly lady and probably hadn't canned on it for many years. But unfortunate for her, she passed away a couple years later, and at an auction I remembered the stove and went to purchase it, and that was my $30 buy. And I think it is the favorite stove that I've ever had, because I don't understand why they made stoves so complicated today. When if I boil something over on the stove, it falls right through to the shelf on the bottom under the burners. I pull the shelf out and I clean it. And it is so simple to maintain. The only thing about it, it is not automatic as the ovens are today. I do have to watch and regulate the flame on the oven, but it's really not that complicated. I do love the Windsor stove. Above the stove is some of the odds and ends that I've picked up at yard sales too, of the ironware, and I use most of those things. I think you will find as you pan on around, I have a little pantry there under the stairs, and our mail pouch sign was a gift from my husband to me on our anniversary one year. Into our bathing room. I say bathing room because we don't have a John in here, as you can see. We are in the process of having it installed at this time. But we do have our bathtub and our lavatory type. If you will notice, at the stainless steel bowl in the middle is just a mixing bowl from one of our dime stores, and my husband drilled a hole in it and made a wash bowl out of it. The wood underneath the wood underneath of the wash bowl was the old porch floor from the Elsie Page Lake Farm, and we confiscated what was left over and stripped it and decided to that we could use it somehow, some way, and this is how we've chosen to use it. The mirror above this sink was in Elsie Bunton Lake's home, above her kitchen sink, and it was something that was in the house, and we have made use of it here. The boxes that I have, the shaving gear and the talcum and the female pills over there of some sort way back when 10, and the little talcum bottles I have picked up from different yard sales and so forth. On the jelly cupboard that was a gift from Aunt Martha and Uncle Neil to us, we have stripped it and made it into a real nice piece here. You will see our homemade back scratcher up there with the corn cob, and the wreath was made by a good friend of ours in Maryland. It was a gift to us. The bottles and window effect here and things are just items, some of them I picked up at yard sales. The box I bought at a yard sale, and I've had more comments on that box because of the label from the National Cash Register Company. Somebody was in the house the other day that said that whole block and that whole, I guess, company has been torn down and it's all been destroyed now. So they were quite fascinated with that particular box. But it's covered with paint and it's a mess, but I love it. Here in this bathing room is this little upland stove, and it really does a nice job. Our house is basically heated with wood. We do have a couple of electric backup heaters, but we use them very, very seldom, only if we go away in the winter time. You will notice the round barrel there in the corner of the room, kind of. I drug that out of somebody's old barn one time at a yard sale, and he sold it to me for 50 cents. So I really thought there again I'd got a terrific buy, and come to find out, I didn't really know what it was. I thought, well, it does look a little bit like an ice cream maker of some sort, but to come to find out that what it really is in the general stores, I guess way back when, they had tins or tubs of ice cream that they packed in ice in the stores, and this was one of the wooden tubs that they put the ice in, and then the ice cream tub set inside it. So that's why it had a hole up so high, I guess. It was not for making the ice cream, but to keep it in the stores. I use it for a clothes hamper, and it works very well. See, on the wall there was given to me from Grandma Elsie, and it was something that she used to put Uncle French and Aunt Martha and my mother in when they were babies. It was their bassinet. The toys that are inside it, the small china doll was a gift from Grandma Elsie to me when I was about 12 years old, and I really cherished that. The Santa Claus is made out of cardboard, and it's something that I usually hang up every Christmas, and I treasure it. I think Aunt Martha perhaps made that when she was small. The larger china doll is one that Aunt Martha makes in her ceramics. She's very talented with her ceramics, and she has made that china doll. The Indian dolls came from my sister in Albuquerque and are not antiques, but the jacks and the blocks and things like that are some of the little toys of yesteryear that I've picked up here and there and from the family. Here you will see some of the tools we've collected, and throughout the house you will see tools from here and there and everywhere. The fro up there, my husband, it's up by the washboard there. He tried to make some shingles for our little porch roof, but gave up. He decided that was too hard to do. The painting on the wall over there reminds me of, I painted it with memories of Bill and Lake in mind, my step-grandfather. As he is panning around, you're panning around there, I'll tell you a little bit about the upstairs. As my husband told you before, the upstairs logs, well, the logs were getting very short, and one of our neighbors here in this area luckily gave us some more logs to finish this part. We chose to put the white ceiling in, which I think it gives it a nice spacious look. And we took the drywall cement or whatever it's called and tried to make it look like it was old and cracked and so forth. So I really like the effect. Okay, the mortar that we used between these logs is just the plain mortar with sand that we got from the riverbanks. Not too far from here. The coffee table that you see beside this bed, I picked up at a junk shop, and it's actually for wash tubs to set on, and I had glass made for it. And on the table are a Little Brown Cocoa book from my childhood, and Noodles, a little book from my husband's childhood. The doll cradle under the washstand there, it was made by our son Mark, and we cherish it very much. The quilt on the iron bed was made around the year 1900, made by Louisa Bunton. And Grandma Elsie gave me the quilt and told me about it. As you see, it needs a little repair there a little bit, but I think that adds character to it. So I don't want to really repair this. Came from Grandma Elsie's, and I understand it belonged to Watson Morgan and Louisa Bunton, and it was built about 1870 here in the French Creek area. The headboard actually is a double headboard. There's a lot more to this bed than I have displayed here. It has a tall headboard, and this was the main reason that we built the upstairs like we have, with the windows separated so that we could accommodate this headboard. But instead I chose to put Grandpa Bunton's picture on the wall above the bed instead of using the tall headboard. Someday I hope to refinish the top of the headboard and have it up too, and maybe Grandpa Bunton somewhere else, but right now this is the way it is. I hope that when we finish the cellar and have our guest bedroom out there, that one of these beds will go out there and we will have just a single bed up here, and we'll have a lot more room up here. The quilt on the bed was a housewarming gift to us from my sister Linda. She made the quilt for us in 1981, and it is a replica of Louisa May Bunton's quilt. Is it May? Did I have that? Louisa?
Not sure.
Well, I'm not. Eliza Bunton's crazy quilt that Linda has. It's very old and very tattered, but Linda copied some of her stitches and some of her designs and put in this quilt, and so it has some little bit of history to it as well as being a relatively new quilt. But I'm very proud of the quilt and the bed. Closet here, you see some of our family pictures. Some of them are very old and some of them are quite recent. But this is both my husband and my family, and some I haven't quite compiled all of them that I want to put up yet. But I'm very much into some of the old photographs. We're glad you've taken this trip with us through our cabin in the hills of French Creek, West Virginia. The Wetzel family has enjoyed showing you our place, and we hope that if you're in this area that you might stop by someday.